I'm absolutely delighted this morning on behalf of CapTech 25 to share some time with Stephen Walters. Stephen is the consulting arm of a wonderful and successful organisation called Optimal Economics. Before Stephen took on this role, he has had a vast experience in the world of economics, both within Australia and outside in a global context, recently being the Chief Economist for the Business Council of Australia. He was also the Chief Economist for New South Wales in terms of our New South Wales Treasury. One of the things that really highlighted to me was his role as the Chief Economist for the investment bank JP Morgan, in which he held that role for some 14 years. There are many other things, but I'd like to really start to find out a little bit more about the world in which we're living, because the next 12 to 18 months is going to play a crucial role in people's decision-making process in terms of investment, looking for partners, and also seeking opportunities. Can I say on behalf of CapTech 25, good morning, Stephen.
Good morning, Jim. It's good to be here.
And we're really delighted to have you. Your conversation and knowledge is second to none, so we're very privileged for you to be telling our audience some critical pearls about what's going to happen. The next 12 to 18 months is going to play a crucial role in people's decision-making process. What do you think we should be looking for, and what trends might be emerging that are significant for both and all stakeholders to consider during that time?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. It's an unusually uncertain time at the moment. There's a lot of particularly offshore factors, which I'll speak about in a minute, but there's a lot of domestic factors that are influencing decision makers as well. And the economy itself, I mean, we know we've had a bit of a difficult time after the pandemic. Growth was very weak during the pandemic, of course, and then things really sprung back really quickly after the pandemic ended and we reopened the economy. But what we ended up with was a lot of inflation. So that's been a big problem. And we had interest rates have to go up. And the good news is that the economy is improving. You might have seen recently we had our national accounts, which is the report card for the economy each quarter. And that showed economic growth had improved a fair bit in the June quarter. And the really good news was that consumer spending was the main driver there. Because remember, since COVID, it's essentially been public sector spending, particularly by the Commonwealth government and migration, it's been driving growth in the economy. So it was really good to get the consumer as the biggest contributor to the growth in the economy. That's really good. And the other thing, of course, is that now that inflation's down, we're starting to get interest rates to come down as well. So the futures markets are still pricing further rate cuts by the Reserve Bank. They've cut 4 times already. That's really good news, and it looks like further to come. A couple of other trends is around regulation. You might have seen recently there was that big productivity roundtable in Canberra. Yes. That I didn't attend, but some former colleagues did, and some very eminent people that I've spoken to were in the room. It was a very select audience there in the cabinet room in Canberra. And I thought what was really good was the focus on regulation, because I think what's happened during COVID and post-COVID is the burden of regulations become very heavy for business. So it was really good to see government and business and unions and the civil society members who were there agreeing that we really need to look at regulation in terms of making it easier to do business, not hard. And that was, I think, one of the really good outcomes of the roundtable. I mentioned a couple of domestic factors. One is just geopolitics, as always. Unfortunately, we've got these ongoing wars in Ukraine with Russia. We've got obviously the conflict here between Israel and Gaza. These really create a lot of uncertainties in the world, and geopolitics has become really central to a lot of things we do now. It used to be that geopolitics was a bit secondary to economics. You'd make your forecasts and you'd predict what was going to happen, and then I would get a look at geopolitics. It's sort of flipped its head now, and we need to look at geopolitics first now and see what's going on in the world, and then sort of do your economics in conjunction with that. So that's quite different. On the final trend, I think, is just what's going on in the US. So obviously, President Trump's knocking over a lot of furniture over there, so to speak. and he's changing the heads of departments. He's trying to change the heads of the Federal Reserve, who sets interest rates. And of course, he's got this really provocative tariff policy that's sort of having a lot of influence around the world. So there's a lot of uncertainty, but I think domestically things looking better. Unfortunately, globally, things still looking a bit tough and a bit uncertain.
So, Stephen, listening to you is quite exciting. Am I interpreting you saying that there is opportunity in Australia going forward in terms of the trend analysis for the next 12 to 18 months, whether it be regulatory, government, whether state or federal, or various stakeholders providing an environment for growth? There is opportunity there amongst all of that?
Oh, definitely. There's always opportunity. I think we've just come through a period where probably uncertainty and risk was masking a lot of that opportunity. So it was a little bit difficult to see where the opportunities were. But I think what's pretty clear now is from the government's point of view, and certainly from the business community, which I used to work with pretty closely, as you said in your intro, Australia's open for business. And we know that capital is really mobile around the world. It really flows pretty seamlessly across borders now. And what we're seeing, I mentioned the US. I mean, the US on some forecasts is on the brink of recession. Some others disagree, but also what President Trump's doing there with some describe as the assault on institutions, and what's happening with the tariff policy and the inward-looking protectionist policies in the US. What that's doing is driving capital flows out of the US. Now, that's rare. Like normally, the US is a magnet for capital from around the world because it has been really successful and it's still really successful. But at the margin, there's been capital flowing somewhere else. So the investors are looking around the world at opportunities. And Australia, of course, has amazing abundance of resources. We're on a big transition in our energy market at the moment. Government's looking at ways, as I said, to reduce regulation. There's good prospects of tax reform, which is not something we've been able to say for 25 years. Can you believe it? We haven't had proper tax reform for 25 years. There's an opportunity. Maybe we're going to get some tax reform now. So now I think there's some really great opportunities in Australia. We're still a really vibrant economy, pretty dynamic. We're in the right part of the world. The fastest growing economies in the world are still in Asia, where we are. So there's some great opportunities here. And I think as those risks sort of ebb away, those opportunities will become even more clear.
I'm excited by your conversation because CapTech is really enveloping an environment for those various stakeholders to come together. I think I'm also hearing you say, and I'd be interested, Stephen, with regards to providing a regulatory framework, if you like, that allows that to take place for private sector investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, at the roundtable, again, I wasn't there, as I said, but there was plenty of comment about it afterwards and even during the roundtable. And I think what the government's realised is maybe during their first term, their regulatory approach was a bit heavy-handed. And I think it sort of put a few investors and decision makers in Australia in a bit of the back foot, so to speak, and not quite sure how to approach investing in Australia. What the roundtable did is, I think, really was a realisation that competitiveness really matters, and that some of our tax settings have been a bit uncompetitive. Some of our regulatory arrangements have been uncompetitive. So, or becoming less competitive. I shouldn't say uncompetitive, becoming less competitive. And things around like AI, so artificial intelligence, there was a big discussion at the roundtable about AI and the opportunities there. And it was really encouraging to see what seemed to be the consensus forming around let's not over-regulate something we don't quite know what it is yet, or how big this is going to be, or how productive it can make our economy. So, no, I think it was really positive that it really recognised that maybe government's been playing too big a role in driving growth in the economy alongside population growth. So maybe there's an opportunity here for the government to say, well, look, the private sector is the sector that drives most investment and most growth in the economy and does the most hiring. So let's really unleash the private sector. Government step back a little bit And that was really great to see. So I think you're right. I think there's great opportunities for private investors to really step in now.
And I think if you and I can say this, because part of my world before was being an economist, I think very subtly through the ASX and those various mechanisms or channels, they're telling a similar story. I think the pricing that's coming through, shares and a whole range of other things to invest and to work with other opportunities that will build their own wealth and also bring other opportunities into play.
Yeah, I always look to financial markets as good signals of what's going on, and they're usually pretty efficient markets, as you know, the equity market, the bond market, and so on. And until very recently, the Aussie share market was at record high.
Yeah.
And I think a couple of weeks ago, it set sort of like 7 or 8 record high days in a period of about 10 days. So the market's telling us that investors like what's going on in Australia. Earnings are a bit sort of not as good as some economists and analysts had hoped, but the market's still telling us that, you know what, we're pushing prices to record highs. We've still got amazingly efficient resource companies. We've got great industrial companies. Our banks, of course, are really, really strong and profitable. So I agree. I think the market is giving us a signal that investors are really favourably looking at Australia right now.
And I think that's also on a platform that I'm encouraged by, Stephen, in terms of political stability. This is not personal whether this one's better than that, but relatively speaking, our political environment in terms of stability is second to none. I'd be interested in your views about that when you're investing or looking for opportunity.
Yeah, things like government policy and political stability, and I think predictability is the other one.
Yeah.
And remember during the first term of the Albanese government, the majority was only 1 or 2 seats. So it only took 1 or 2 people to either change their mind or thank goodness this didn't happen, to die. And there could have been a change of government. Like that didn't happen, of course. But now the government, obviously after the election in May, has now a really, really big, solid majority. It looks likely, as most political commentators are saying, that this government is going to be in power for at least another 2 terms, could be even longer. So some people won't like that, but what it does do is give I think as you were saying, a really stable political backdrop to what had been a pretty contentious, I would argue, a pretty contentious decade and a bit of Australia changing prime ministers and governments changing pretty quickly, and that's not going to happen in the near term. And I think also government policy matters. And I note the Prime Minister's comments around the economic summit, when some of the ideas that were raised were a bit left field. And his view is, well, we didn't get a mandate at the election for that, so we're not going to do that. So again, it comes to this predictability of government policy. I think it's really important for investors when they look around the world to say, well, where's as I mentioned earlier, those geopolitical risks are pretty prominent. Where are they lost? And I would argue in Australia, given the political dynamics and the stability and the policy predictability we're looking at, I think Australia comes out pretty high in that regard.
Well, Stephen, that's very valuable and very, very good insight into people thinking, and I'm very grateful for what you're telling our audience. Another interesting thing that you said, and I just wanted to go back on it, you were saying that we are very well geographically located to the Asian conglomerate, being all of those companies, whether you want to include India and so on, within that Asian, when you say Asian, I do, all of that area is on our back doorstep.
Yeah, it sure is. No, I include India as well. And India, obviously a massive economy of more than 1 billion people, and China similarly more than 1 billion people. And 70% of our exports go directly to economies in Asia. And I'd include Japan and South Korea in that. They're amongst our top export markets, as is China. We're developing trade with India. I noticed the relationship between the leaders is very respectful and very productive. So we have a shared history, shared cultures, shared love of cricket, of course. So I think there's a lot of opportunities in such a big market like India, but already Australia is really doing a massive trade with the economies in Asia. We do trade with Europe and we trade with the US, of course, but predominantly most of our trade is done with Asia. And that's because it's a really dynamic region in the world. It's a very young population, huge growth in the middle class, the so-called middle class in Asia, in particular in China and India. So I think, as we know, as people move from the more working class, your income increases and you demand more services and products as you become middle class and even higher class if you want to, then that means demand for things like services that Australia provides, like tourism and education, healthcare and banking. And also we can fuel growth in things like housing and manufacturing and power generation in those economies as well, because we export commodities. So I think it's a really, really natural symbiotic relationship between Australia and Asia, and that's where our future lies.
Stephen, I've been very fortunate to hear you speak previously, and I can remember coming up to you and thanking you personally because of the valuable insights in the roles that you were previously playing, and the professionalism and the really subtle takeouts. In terms of CapTech, what do you think is the platform for people to consider when they walk into that room to gain from listening to your incredible knowledge and analysis?
Oh, look, I think sort of to value the importance of networking and having good relationships. I think we as economists always sort of tend to talk in a theoretical way, but I think in practice on the ground, you really need to establish good relationships and trust. And I think these sort of forums like CapTech is a really good way to do that. But some of the takeaways I hope people come away with: one, I mentioned it earlier, that our economy's been a bit weak and our productivity's been pretty poor. But I think I mentioned earlier on that both of those things are turning around. We've got growth in our economy picking up, and the government and business, for that matter, and unions all now have a joint focus on improving productivity, which, to be honest, in the last term of government wasn't really the focus. It really is now. So that's really encouraging. The other thing is, I think, really focus on the regulatory burden, because a lot of business leaders have been saying, hey, this burden's getting really heavy. We need to change that. So I hope people come away with a realization, yeah, the government's really trying to address the regulatory burden, things like approval times, environmental approvals, they're really important. So we don't get really sort of adverse outcomes in our economy by approving projects that shouldn't get up. But the government's really focused on that. So I think that's really good. And just finally, just to remember that our economy is open for business. There was a time there where I think there was a bit of perception that maybe Australia's gone a bit inwards looking. But a great example is the tariffs that the US has put on virtually every country in the world, including Australia, despite our free trade agreement, is that we haven't retaliated. You would notice that Australia doesn't have tariffs. We didn't decide to put tariffs on as retaliation. Other countries did. So that's a really positive thing, that I think Australia still really benefits from free and open trade. And that means don't put tariffs on, even if countries put tariffs on your products. So they're the things I hope people come away with.
Stephen, it's been absolutely so incredible to hear what you're talking about. You break down complex matter and put it into very simplistic and opportunities for people to take away. What I love about your presentation, I'm so delighted now that optimal economics is really out there, wanting to play a major role in bringing people together and educating them about making the right decisions. To the audience, they should also know, and I kept this to the end, you're not only an qualified economist, but you have postgraduate qualifications in applied finance. So you're able to really look at projects and give really proper, insightful information and analysis on the world in which we live that people want to invest. And that's very rare in terms of being able to mix, some decades of knowledge and real knowledge to bring about a great event that's going to happen in November of this year. Stephen, it's been a really grateful, I'm very grateful and delight to talk to you this morning.
Thanks, Jim. It's been great to be with you, and I really look forward to the conference in November.
And just before we leave, you'll be there and be able to talk to various people. I hope, you're so busy here and there, but to be able to spend some time with us and to talk to various stakeholders would be great. So you'll be there for some time?
I will, Jim. Yeah, I'm not just coming in for my session. I'll be there for the whole conference.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that in itself is a great takeaway. Thank you so much for your time today, Stephen.
Thanks, Jim. Good to talk to you.